We begin, however, with the three big Democrats who won't run for re-election. Dodd, Dorgan, and Ritter. Our strategists are here, Democrat Steve McMahon and Republican Todd Harris. Todd, you're giggling like the Easter Bunny. What are you so happy about? Do you think this is good? By the way, your teeth are so white, I'm appalled. What's going on? What is going on?
It must be the Florida sunshine on the teeth.
Okay.
I'll tell you what's going on. Here in Florida, where I am now, the quintessential swing state, Barack Obama has a 48% approval rating, 46% disapproval rating. Nationally, he started his presidency with a 3-to-1 approval. He's now almost even. That is the fastest drop in terms of presidential approval of any president in recent memory. You couple that with the 20% approval rating that Congress has, and that makes for a very, very difficult political environment for incumbents to run for re-election. The public they're mad as hell, and they don't want to take it anymore, and it's largely surrounding the issue of spending, whether it's a $1 trillion deficit, $1 trillion health care plan, bank bailouts, auto bailouts. This is not a political environment that Democratic incumbents, especially in swing states and swing districts,
well, that shatters everything I believe about politics. That completely shatters everything I know about politics. The public, before you get in this, Steve, care about their own condition, the way things are, the symptoms of their lives, how hard it is to get a loan, how hard it is for them or their kids to get a job or to hold on to a job. That's how people think. They don't think about these big numbers up there on the board until things are bad for them. And when they are bad for them, then they start pointing at these things. Anyway, here's the president's press secretary reacting to the news you just destroyed by going after it in a partisan way, which is fair enough. It's why you're here. Here's Gibbs going the other way.
It is hard to look into the crystal ball 11 months from Election Day. There's retirements on both sides of the aisle in the Senate. They'll be the same in the House. We'll let the political season play out over the course of the next 11 months. I don't want to make a lot of predictions for 11 months from now.
Well, Steve McMahon, before you get going, I'll interrupt you again. Let's take a look at those numbers he alluded to there. In the House of Representatives, 15 Republicans are quitting this year, 12 Democrats. You can see those numbers in red on the House side. Then on the Senate side, you can see them in black now. 6 Republicans we knew were quitting, but now we know Dodd and Dorgan. Why are Dodd and Dorgan quitting, and how can you take that as anything more than a loss for the Democrats? These guys were big shots.
It's a loss for the Democrats because these guys are big shots. And what you said is absolutely right. Voters make judgments based on what's happening in their lives. And right now, you can see Wall Street recovering. You can see economic indicators suggesting that the economy is picking up again. But in Main Street America, people feel like their lives aren't on the right track. They don't feel optimistic about their future. Their 401ks are still worth 30 or 40% less than they were, and they don't know what their kids' future is like. The incumbents, they believe, are not getting it done. So in that sense, Todd's right. This isn't a Democratic problem. This is an incumbent problem.
Yeah, I agree. Well, let's take a look at Dodd, though, because he's the biggest of the big shots quitting today. Here he is. Chris Dodd surprised me when I read the paper this morning with the lead story in the Post. Here's Chris Dodd explaining his departure from the big time.
Over the past 12 months, I've managed 4 major pieces of legislation through the United States Congress, served as chair and acting chair of 2 major Senate committees, placing me at the center of the 2 most important issues of our time, health care and reform of financial services. I lost a beloved sister in July, and in August, Ted Kennedy. I battled cancer over the summer, and in the midst of all of this, found myself in the toughest political shape of my career.
You know, Todd Harris, it's a weird, strange world out there when a guy like Chris Dodd has to leave politics because of poll numbers, and somebody on your side of the aisle named David Vetter, who got caught with prostitutes, professional, what they call them, sex workers, both in Washington and in his home state of Louisiana, and he's headed towards re-election. Explain the thinking of the voters. Could it be they vote on symptoms, and they're more angry about what's affecting them personally than they are about what politicians are up to, even in their hanky-panky world?
Well, I'm not from Louisiana, but obviously...
Explain it. It's really astounding.
He hasn't survived.
Well, he's headed towards it. What's going on?
Well, he obviously has a better connection, despite anything that has happened in his past, to the people of Louisiana than Chris Dodd, after 4 or 5 terms, has with the people of Connecticut. I mean, there is no other way to explain it. I do think that
the connection with the people is, in this case, a professional sex worker.
Connect with the hookers, and you'll
is that how you connect with people these days?
Listen,
somebody love me, please.
I think North Dakota, the most reliable predictor of outcomes in elections is voting performance in a state. You can look at North Dakota and you can see a state that's a very, very red state. Yeah. You can understand Byron Dorgan. Connecticut is a very blue state, and I think Senator Dodd, you have to take him at his word. He's done everything he can for the people of Connecticut for 30 years. He just lost his best friend in the Senate. Yeah. He lost a sister. He's gone through cancer treatment himself, and he's looking at this environment, and he knows it's going to be a tough campaign. He knows it's an uphill campaign, and he's wondering, don't I have better things to do with my life? And that's the real tragedy here, is that people like Chris Dodd are choosing to walk away because they don't think that serving or fighting a tough campaign is more important or more worthy than going off and living a nice retirement. And we're losing great people because frankly, Todd, the Bush administration left such a mess.
Let me ask you this. Suppose you're a Republican, suppose you're a Democrat. You can do the Republican part, Todd. You got to go out there and tell people as you go and visit them at home in your Senate seat or your House district, and you got to say, look, you've been paying me $180,000 a year for about 20 years now, and I've been serving you, and here's the results. 10% unemployment, a stock market which is wobbly, we never know which way it's going to go, a national debt which is tripled. What else? Everything seems scary and zany. We have a trade deficit which is horrendous. Nothing seems to be working at the federal government level. Katrina was a disaster. We can't seem to stop the terrorists from at least getting on our planes. What do you brag about when you go home if you're a politician now and say, look what I did for you? What do you brag about if you're a Republican? What has the Republican Party done for anybody in the last 10 or 15 years? What have they done, the Republican Party, for the people?
Well, Chris, as you well know, voters don't decide.
No, I'm asking you a question. What have the Republican Party done for the people in the last 10 or 20 years?
I'm answering your question about how you would win an election in 2010.
No,
and it's not about talking
my other
about
question. What do you tell people you've done for them if you're a Republican? You had a president who signed every single spending bill when the Republican Party was in power. You had Katrina, which was a disaster. Iraq, which most people think was dishonest and we shouldn't be there. An Afghan war that won't end. Well, we haven't been hit since 9/11, but of course 9/11 does count. What would you brag about if you're a politician right now?
Well, first of all, the Bush administration kept the country safe, but I want to say,
well, except the one big day.
Hold on a minute. Part of the problem that Democrats have is that they are so obsessed with continuing to attack the Bush administration. You guys are so obsessed with trying to get your pound of flesh that you're ignoring the real concerns that voters have in 2010. I hope to God that people on the left continue to try to go after President Bush and his record for the next 11 months, because Republicans are going to be talking about being a real check and balance on the runaway spending that's going on in Washington right now. Democrats can re-prosecute.
When did they start being a check and balance?
There's no balance, Todd. There's no balance. There's just a check. Saying no thanks, not right now, not so fast, not so much.
Saying no to $1 trillion health care.
Todd, that's not a program for success. And frankly, this isn't a Democratic problem. This, as you point out correctly, is an incumbent problem. And the fact that you're sitting there in Florida today on Marco Rubio's campaign, which you're doing a great job on, demonstrates the point. Charlie Crist was unbeatable in the Republican primary, unbeatable in the general election, and now he's got incumbentitis. He's a Republican. He's not a Democrat. The problem is not a Democratic problem. It's an incumbent problem. Tell me that's not true, Todd, Marco Rubio's consultant.
You are partially true, but the reason why Charlie Crist is having problems in Florida,
he's the governor of Florida, and he's perceived as the worst thing he can be right now, a moderate, right? That's the worst thing he can be.
The reason he's having problems is because he's not able to say credibly to Republicans that he could go to Washington and be a check and a balance on the Obama administration. Marco Rubio can make a very credible argument to Florida voters that
Based on?
Based on his core beliefs. So when Charlie Crist stood next to Barack Obama and embraced literally and figuratively the stimulus package, that was a signal to Florida Republicans that he is not someone who's going to go and take on Nancy Pelosi, take on Harry Reid,
no, Todd,
and take on Barack Obama in Washington.
That was a signal to moderate Republicans in Florida that he cared more about his state than he cares about saying no thanks, not right now. And that's the problem Republicans have right now.
So I just wanted to get the Republican bragging point straight here. So the Republican Party has kept us safe except for 9/11. Is that the argument? No, really, because you had the worst attack on the American homeland in history, but you're bragging about your ability to defend the country because you say, well, you defended America except for 9/11. That's your defense, right? That's the bragging point of the Republican Party for the last. I asked you to name one thing they've done for this country in 15 to 20 years. I'll keep going back further, and you're having a hard time giving me an answer. What has the Republican Party done for the country? I'm not having a hard.
Chris, I'm not having a hard time giving you an answer.
Squandered the surplus.
When I decide to write a book about the history of the last 20 years of the Republican Party, I'll be happy to talk to you about that. My job is to win elections in 2010, and I'm going to keep my eye on the ball.
Steve McMahon, YouTube is watching. You're the Republican consultant, one of the best in the country. Tell me what the Republican Party has done for this country in the last 10 to 20 years. Thank you. Steve McMahon, thank you. Todd Harris, you got plenty of time, 64. We'll have you back with the answer.